run your own race. And yeah, just realize like, just be comfortable in the fact that you're running your own race. Like, I appreciate that, yes, it's very easy to feel like your race is slower than other people's. Other people are getting other opportunities that you're not getting. And I think just be faithful in the actions that you're taking and the fact that you're doing good. Let that push you to carry on doing the good stuff that you're doing.
From Kona Juda and Dipia, Imene Msindis Wesi, Umvelisen Rangomelis Wesidwe, formerly known as Wazima Donzel, bringing you a show about creative entrepreneurs live from the landmark that not only birth SA street culture but also formalize the street hustle.
Kona Juda and Dipia special edition, very, very special edition, capital art edition. We have Karabo Morule. I think for the first time in history, we have someone who's trying to preserve the creative space on the podcast. Not someone who's creating. You are like, I see what you guys are doing. Let's make it better. Let's protect this. How are you doing?
We all have different roles to play.
Yes.
I'm well, and you?
I'm great. You come from being an actuarial scientist. You're an actuarial, as you pronounce it.
Actuary.
You're an actuary.
Yes.
You come from being an actuary. You're like, okay, cool. Let me look at the art world. How can we actually commercialize this and protect this as an asset?
It's interesting. It's not only that. So my background is actually in financial services. So yes, I qualified as an actuary, but I'd actually always wanted to be in finance. I was more interested in finance and investment, and kind of that's what I feel like I've been doing. And so I worked in investment banking in Joburg, in London. Then I moved to South Africa, and I thought I've never worked in a traditional actuarial role. So I joined an insurer, and I was fortunate that I worked in senior management roles when I was there. But a lot of that time was around thinking about personal finance, like the finances of you and me. How am I managing my finances? What are the tools and the asset classes that I'm investing in? What are the products that are available? And am I able to get advice? And yeah, that's really important. I think it's probably a topic for another day, but I'm also very passionate about personal finance and financial inclusion in general. And I guess it's more thinking about it like that in a way, but it's combining the two. I appreciate that it's an important cultural asset, but I'm also super interested in the fact that around the world there's people who see it also as a financial asset. And so that's why I'm interested in preserving it, because I'm trying to help people maximize the value of their finances. Yeah.
There's the value of the finances. You create capital art. For our viewers at home who don't know what capital art is, can you break it down?
Sure, it's a web-based platform to enable art collectors to preserve the value of their art collection by performing collection management, what is called collection management, and that is saving the details of the artworks that you have in your collection. And it's not only paintings and drawings, it's actually sculptures, it can be NFTs if you're tech inclined, it could be sculptures, audiovisual work, tapestry, and I think it's also about helping people appreciate that the broad kind of field of what artworks can be. So it is about making sure you document who's the artist who created this artwork, when was it created, what is it made from, where did you acquire it from, how much did you pay for it, and making sure you understand who are the previous owners as well. So those are all the things that you should be keeping about an artwork. But I know lots of us are just buying artwork and putting it up on the walls because it makes the room look nice. It makes, if you've got a sculpture, it makes the room kind of interesting. Sometimes we forget about all this important stuff to make sure that we're maximizing the value for ourselves, but also for the maker of this artwork.
How do you then move from this corporate background into entrepreneurship?
Yes.
Because a lot of people, they're in their 9 to 5 right now. They're like, okay, cool. I'm ready. I have this bug. I want these things to look like this. How can one transition?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of kind of owning and running my own business, this is something which has been an aspiration since university. There's a friend of mine who I met in varsity. I was staying in like a women's only res, but we actually used to have meals together with the other men's res. And he distinctly remembers, like, we were going around the table asking people, okay, what are you going to do after varsity? And I just said, I want to own a bank. Quite definitively. And everybody was kind of shocked, as like, why is this, this chick, she's like basically trying to say she's studying finance and studying actuarial science, but she says she wants to own a bank. And so I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial kind of mindset around how I thought about what I was going to do in general in life. But obviously, yes, you start somewhere, and it's about learning the intricacies of that industry and understanding how things work. And actually, I encourage that a lot. So in the tech world, I'm actually what you call a mature founder because basically I only kind of started my business in my late 30s. But I really kind of encourage people to go through that corporate experience because you understand kind of what is this organism that's called a company. And it's actually worthwhile understanding it from various number of facets. And I've been very fortunate because I started, from the bottom as an analyst, and you work your way up, and I got to managing director level. Maybe not so much on the operations side, but certainly on managing people. That's actually really important to learn. But it's something which I always had an aspiration about. So, like I say, I was working for this investment bank. I moved back to South Africa. I joined this insurance company. And I was in this role as a strategy and marketing executive. And like I said, it was just to kind of see what insurance companies are all about. After 12 months, I was like, I've seen enough. I think I want to do something else. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine who had similarly made the jump from a corporate to being an entrepreneur. They were a commodities trader. And he gave me such great advice. He said, Karabo, when you're starting a new business, it generally takes about 3 years to gain traction with whatever you're doing. And for people to know that you're legit, you're serious about this thing. So make sure you have 3 years worth of your expenses and savings before you make that leap. So that was really good, I think, advice because at least it gave me some sort of what's my next step. It was very, very helpful, and I always mention that in kind of how I'm thinking about my story, because it was very foundational about me thinking about making sure I had the ability to kind of really give my all to my business venture, but not have to worry about really trying to struggle with just finances. At the time, I was kind of, I think like many young professionals, I had property, so I had a bond to pay. At the time, I think I didn't have car payments, fortunately. I think at least that's one of the things I'd always focused on trying to make sure I just avoided. And yeah, I was one of those people who's like, I'm going to be buying multiple investment properties, So yes, I'm there with a lot of debt, actually. It's secured debt, so it's a good thing, but still it's debt nonetheless. And actually, it's not like I was tracking what's happening with my finances. And the role that I then got, not long after that, was managing the members in the retirement funds we administered. Because I moved into the corporate business, which is employee benefits in an insurance company. And in that role, one of the business units I was looking after was providing financial education to the members in the retirement funds we administered. So the guy who was managing that business unit said, Karabo, you need to come and see what it's actually like. I think it'll be very useful to understand what I do. So I went to one of the sessions. It was a half-day session, and they covered a course which was the 5 secrets of money management. And you'd think, yes, I studied finance, I studied actuarial science. I know quite a lot about how to make these products and how to calculate them in terms of calculating what the premiums are, taking into consideration people's life expectancy and the like. But actually, it was so kind of instructive and formative for me to go through that course. It felt like it was very simple, but it was actually such pearls of wisdom. And that kind of changed also how I thought about money, I think, in general. So I started doing things like tracking my expenses. So I've got a spreadsheet, I looked at my bank statement, check what I spend my money on, just to understand actually what am I spending? Because if my friend said 3 years worth of your running expenses, you need to know what exactly are my running expenses. I started realizing I'm spending money on stuff which really doesn't add any value to me. So I just kind of changed, and that role I think helped a lot in terms of just being very mindful about what exactly are my assets. So I worked on that, understood that, worked on this goal. 2015, I get to the goal, and I'm like, I'm ready to quit now. I'm actually thinking about getting into a shoemaking business. And I go to London for a weekend course in shoemaking. I start making contacts in the shoe business. I'm trying to chat with some guys who started a shoe business, luxury shoe business in Kenya, and they source their leathers from Ethiopia and that type of thing. And then I got promotion at work. So I kind of decided actually it'll be better for my CV if I also say I could have been a managing director for at least 2 years. So I decided to stay and defer my kind of dream. But it was actually very useful because during that year, it was kind of very transformational in terms of me thinking about the impact that culture has in an organization, which is something which maybe I didn't take as much kind of to heart. And actually even now there's even a Gibbs business case study that was written by a lady, and actually there's people who are studying it all over the world, so which is quite cool.
How does it feel in that moment where you can see your dream? You're going to look at this thing, you try the shoot thing, you're figuring it out. And
Yeah.
probably in your head, you probably have the name, where you want the store to exist, how does product exist. How do you allow yourself to get past your dream for that moment? Because a lot of us, we have this thing, like we draw it up. Now it's worse. We render these ideas because
Yeah.
we want to see it and sell it to your broader community.
Yeah.
How do you then come back to yourself and say to those 5 friends, your family members, you said, I'm leaving this thing, I'm doing this thing. How do you go past that?
I think it was for me like understanding that one, there weren't any black women who had been in the MD role before. So I also like appreciated the signaling that provides for other people, and the fact that other people will then see that it's possible, and they will then certainly take the reins, because like I said, I wasn't imagining that I would do it for very long. So I thought that also was important. There was a lot of privilege in that, but yes, it was a very difficult decision for me to make, because I thought I'm so close to like achieving what I wanted to achieve. But I also appreciated it's not like this next step was going to divert me from where I was going. It was just deferring it. And I knew that even in the deferral of that, the time period was going to be well spent. It was going to be spent on learning more about myself, learning more about a different level of an organization. And actually, in time, it got to the stage where then I was reporting to the CEO of a listed company. Not many people get that opportunity, and to be able to then engage in the investor roadshows and travel to the Paris and London and New York and San Francisco, talking to investors about what I was doing in my business. So I think that part actually, I think, encouraged me to say, that is also something that I'm learning in this role. It's not like it was going to be time that I was going to be wasting. So for me, I didn't necessarily, yes, it was a tough decision, but I didn't necessarily feel like I was giving something up. In a way, I knew I was always going to still do it at some point in time. It was just a case of not at that point in time.
You established Capital Art end of 2020.
Yeah.
Is this a COVID dream that made it out? What's the intention now?
So
3 years later.
Yeah, 2019. Just to kind of go a little bit before that, 2019 was very informative because I actually attended Harvard and did what was called the Advanced Management Program. Effectively, it was covering a lot of different topics around economic development. It covered like analyzing different countries and what makes a country really great in terms of GDP growth, but also corporate leadership and corporate accountability, learning about strategy, marketing, different types of roles. It's kind of like a super MBA in a way, but only in 7 weeks, which was great. But also learning obviously from my other classmates, 195 other people who are leading very big organizations around the world. And during that time, there was a course called the 21st Century Operations Manager, which was focused on tech and innovation. And that was really foundational for me to appreciate even more. I knew it was there, and so I had been involved in other kind of digital enablement in the business I was running, trying to encourage for more digital distribution. But learning that and seeing the breadth of how tech plays a role just inspired me. And I knew when I came back to South Africa that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into tech. And that tech was the thing that I needed to make sure I focused on, because that was really part of the future. So towards the end of 2019, then I just made the decision that by that time I'd made enough of the time that I had in this managing director role. I thought initially I was going to be there for 2 years. I stayed for 4. So I thought I had enough under my belt, and now enough kind of gumption to just say now is probably the time to move.
Yeah, the 3 years that up.
Exactly. So early 2020. So in October 2019, I announced my resignation. January 2020, I left my role, and I left with the intention of starting an investment holding company and becoming an investor operator entrepreneur. And I happened to have a conversation with a lady who was an art advisor in kind of February 2020, and that's kind of where it started. In this discussion, we were starting to have this conversation about art as an asset class. And just the fact that she was an art advisor, it was a role I'd never heard of. We talk about these kind of roles that people have in the creative industry.
Yeah.
I had never come across an art advisor. And obviously, having worked in an insurance company where I was managing a team of 5,000 people, a lot of those, like 80% of that was people in the financial advice and distribution space. I thought that was quite novel, like somebody who's doing the same for art that I had seen happening for insurance products. And so, art advisors assist you with, if you're a collector, understanding what are the things that you want to buy and what are the things you may want to buy in terms of building your collection. And that part was kind of really interesting for me. the link between the financial services background that I had and now applying it to this new asset class art. I had been a collector before, but maybe had not necessarily seen it in that particular way, or gave me a different perspective to see it. And so then thinking about the fact that, yes, I have this art on my walls, but actually I don't have a digital interface to interact with the management of my art collection, and that's what Capital Art does. So yes, superficially, initially it was focused on this issue of creating a platform where art collectors can document the details of the art collection. But then you start to appreciate that with the history of the African continent, there's lots of artwork that are created where people will say the artist is unknown.
Yes.
And you start to realize that that's also that's also related to the economic disposition that's been happening on our continent. Because by saying the artist is unknown, it means you can ascribe a lot of value to this one artwork, which then doesn't transcend to the maker of that artwork. So it means that that person's other artworks can't similarly be valued. You see kind of stories of there's this Gabonese mask that went on auction and sold for 2 million euros. Yes, that was also kind of how the family who got that mask might have been dodgy. Yes, it may have been looted. And so that's a separate kind of restitution issue. But at the end of the day, whoever made this mask, because now you don't know who it is, you can't say the other masks that they made are also worth 2 million euros.
Then how do you do the market development around this thing? Because now there's but so many X amount of people have art that most people can access.
Agreed. How
have you found it as Capital Art? Say, okay, cool. You guys have these collections. Let's do this.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate that I think there's actually a growing art community in South Africa. And especially there's a big focus on trying to make sure that there's younger collectors. Because yes, there's people who have always known about these art institutions and about art collecting. That demographic tends to be older and generally white. And you've always had black artists. And sadly, you have then not had the focus on making sure that there's you know about who the black collectors are. And typically, you're not growing the kind of cohort of younger collectors. But there are people who are doing amazing work with this. And sometimes we don't realize it. So most of the art fairs, on Friday mornings, they'll often invite schools to come into the art fair. I think that's a really great way to just get more young people to appreciate. There's this kind of place where you can buy art called an art fair. You can go and see amazing art by different artists. And effectively, it's actually an expo for all these galleries, right? Because, yes, I might have a gallery in Parkhurst. I don't know who's going to be flowing through Parkhurst to come and visit my gallery. Or I could be somewhere else, in Soweto, in wherever. But what's nice about an expo, which is what an art fair basically is now you're getting everybody to come see all the galleries that might be wanting to exhibit at this fair and be able to sell their artworks. So yes, there's great ways of encouraging young people to look at art fairs that way, not only for people who are just creatively talented and are in art and are wanting to become artists. Similarly, the director at the FNB Art Joburg, Mandla Sibeko, he started something called the BMW Young Collectors Co. And that's now a new community for young people to actually engage in art and learn more about art. And I've been very fortunate to actually have been on the panel in some times to talk about art collecting and my practice around art collecting, and to talk about Capital Art as well. But I've also been a member myself because I've been an art collector. So it's been a great way to meet new artists, understand interesting art institutions, and then understand the art of art collecting. So there have been people who've been driving it, and actually that's the role I'm trying to play, is play in these spaces and encourage it. The best ways I've found is in one way trying to kill two birds with one stone. Obviously, as you know, when you're starting a new business, you're trying to get search engine optimization to drive people to your website. So the big thing that I did was actually start blogging. So now publish a monthly blog where it's talking about art collecting and it's focused on art collecting. Not many blogs are focused on that. There are some art communities around the world, but I found that there's not many focusing on African art. So that's also what it plays. Yeah.
For the bias of the viewers at home, who are mainly artists or people around artists, how do I get into a collection?
Yeah.
For all the years you've been purchasing art, let alone now connecting the buyers to the sellers.
Yeah.
How does a young artist go to Wits? I've exhibited at WHAM, I've tried with Kalishnikov, I've submitted artwork or two, I've had a private show, been in group shows. How do we get into collections? Because most people are now aware of art because of the Dean's collection.
Yes, agree. So that's the collection from Alicia Keys and
Swiss Beats.
and Swiss Beats, exactly. And there's many other collectors. I mean, even Jay-Z, he references kind of,
His Basquiat's
exactly,
in the
Basquiat's,
kitchen, the
exactly,
Deep touch.
exactly. So, and getting into collections, I think it is about, people collect also because of the storytelling that's associated with an artwork. So I think if you are kind of authentic in like the series of artworks that you're creating, and maybe there's a narrative around them, I think that helps a lot in terms of people being able to place where does this artwork fit into everything else that this person is doing? What does it mean to them? And it could be that, yeah, you're just painting items. But sometimes I think where there's like, the context of kind of seeing artworks in the context of an exhibition, where somebody's working towards a particular objective and they've drawn works that fit into a narrative around that. Sometimes I think that draws people to it. Sometimes it is just that you're drawing something or creating an artwork that's kind of a moment in time and capturing something that is reflective of something you're experiencing. The human condition is something that everybody can relate to. And so I think it is about, trying to be maybe vulnerable in that way of exposing what you were thinking and how you're creating this work. That I think drives why collectors buy. But people buy for different reasons, They buy because, yes, it resonates with them, it reminds them of something. Maybe you have been following this person's story in terms of how they've been exhibiting in different places, and you just admire their work, or they've won an art prize, and then that actually also draws you to thinking more about their work and the body of work that they've shown and where they're going. I think as an artist, it also helps to expand your visibility, and that's where social media has obviously played a massive role in assisting artists in getting more visibility. So Instagram, I think always yes, be careful about being mindful about like what happens from a copyright perspective, but platforms like that have been very instrumental in just widening the reach of where a person can be seen by lots of different people and getting more people to understand their story. I think similarly, attending different residencies, that's something which I would actually recommend. I've noticed that one, it expands your mindset. I think it's like such a gift to be able to travel to different places, be inspired by something different. Mm-hmm. So look out for the various residencies. There's some which actually have been supporting South African artists for a while. And I think it's a great opportunity to just be inspired by other people who are creating in a different space. So that, I think, is something which I think is worthwhile taking into consideration. But I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I'm just giving some insights in terms of what I've seen in the experiences that I've seen. And I think apply for the biennales, apply for the different ways in which you can create and just show different people what you're creating.
You talked about preserving culture and adding financial value.
Yes.
In various panels you've been on.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Just the fact that you are highlighting who's this artist makes a very big difference in people then being able to understand what are the other artworks that this person has also created, and then being able to ascribe value to it if, for example, one of those artworks, for example, goes to auction, as a method of trying to discover the price and the demand in terms of the demand for this artwork, because the supply is there, it's up on the auction, website, etc. Now trying to understand, are other people liking it? But I think as a collector, you start to appreciate that you then become the custodian for this artwork that you actually have, because you almost are the one who has to capture the story and the narrative around this artwork. Mm. It's in your best interest because you're the one who owns that asset. Yes, the artists obviously themselves, they have interest in that, but I think as a collector, that's one of the ways in which you can also become a patron of the arts in terms of being a custodian for the story related to this artwork, an image of this artwork, the details like, the materials it's made from, so that if you ever need to sell it or in just telling the narrative to other people, you can use the correct information to tell that story. So that's the thing which I think a lot of us maybe forget is sometimes, yes, you may have artwork at home, but if you don't understand what's that narrative, then it just becomes decoration. It's very easy to then throw it out, or for somebody else who also doesn't appreciate it to just throw it in the bin when, you're moving or something happens to you. If somebody doesn't know that this artwork is important because of who this artist is, where this artwork was exhibited, who owned it, before I owned it, if it was passed down from other people, then yes, you're not going to place value on it. Why is the Michelangelo priceless or the Mona Lisa priceless? It's because everybody knows it and everybody knows about that artist and the other works that person did. and they revere it. And I'm just
Successful
trying...
association.
Exactly. And I think it's just the fact that in particular in South Africa, where we know so many black artists did not get the recognition that they deserved because of the history of apartheid. And actually before that, colonialism similarly did the same, where you've got the Benin bronzes, which the British Army looted when they burned down the whole of Benin city and then took those artifacts to London. You know, you start to appreciate that there's value in these things and in how they preserve the story of what was happening at that time. And that's a story which should be preserved for other people to learn from. So that's why I feel I'm really passionate about this, because I feel like there's an element of it where in particular in the global south in general, but it's something which can happen to anybody. If we're not mindful of keeping these elements of cultural history and looking after them, maybe the next generation might burn them, and then actually you don't have something that talks about Karabo being here or this artist having been here and having said the story and told us some insight about the times that they lived in. I think that's something which is really powerful, because I am kind of agitated about the fact that sometimes I'm only reading stuff from the 1700s from Europe. In the 1700s, Africans also existed. What was their story? And I want to learn more about their story.
We have a generation of overindulgence in everything. Why would you say young people should redirect the money from the LV towards collecting art? Because we all yes, the economy is bad, but we're seeing a lot of people with disposable income right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say it's not necessarily about redirecting, but make space for. Because I'm one of those people, it's like, even when saving, you really say pay yourself first and save all the money, but actually, I really want to buy that thing that I want to buy. Like, I want to buy that nice shoe, I want to buy that nice bag. So I think just try to do both. And I'm just, wanting to encourage more people to say, one, there's creatives who are doing amazing work, and it's great if we can also be the custodian for their stories and what they're telling. It's an amazing talent. Not everybody's gifted with that talent. And like I say, everybody has a role to play. I'm part of that role of kind of trying to collect it and trying to create platforms where it makes it easier for people to be able to do that as well. Try and make space for it. Visit galleries and exhibitions and art institutions widely to get a feel for what you like. To hear these stories, because sometimes you just hear some remarkable stories, right? You hear stories about how, if you are not in Ndebele, you might look at Esther Mahlangu's works and just think, they're really pretty. And then you understand that actually in Ndebele culture, what you paint on your walls is a signal to other people in your community about either things which are in the periphery in the community, things, it's messaging. So if I'm traveling to another village, what I see on the wall communicates something to me. And it's quite sacred that they have this messaging system, and maybe not everybody knows it, but you can appreciate that there's something which is there, which is actually a deep part of cultural heritage and should be preserved. So when you then go to the Esther Mahlangu exhibition, the retrospective at the Iziko is coming to WAM later this year, you see something different about what she's done, number one, and what actually those artworks represent.
You're part of a creation of industry, because I don't think it's big enough of an industry in South Africa.
Great.
How have you, one, maintained the business in the first phases of people just understanding, let alone investing, and secondly, in seeing what's happening in the world and redirecting it for us?
It's always a challenge with, like I said, with any new business, and also because it generally seen as a niche. If I was starting a general fintech business that was making loans to people, I probably would have been very easy to go get funding from investors. When I talk to people about this, I think a lot of people do appreciate that. They feel like it's very niche. They feel like it's only for certain people, whereas I'm trying to highlight that actually it's for everybody, because even if you have one painting, you are a collector. That's how I see it. And I'm trying to kind of encourage more people by doing that. I'm trying to encourage more people to collect also because there's a free option on our website where you can save the details of up to 3 artworks. So it is about trying to, I guess maybe I'm very fortunate and very privileged to be in a position where, yes, I'm like self-funding this business, but it's actually been growing, and I've been very fortunate to have had subscribers from like day one of the launch of the business, who are then contributing. And yes, they're looking after their artworks, it's great, but they're also contributing to the business. And it's been great to just be then given platforms to discuss what I'm doing. To have presented at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2022, presented to the Stanford Entrepreneurship Thought Leadership series, which is a great platform for tech entrepreneurs, run by Stanford University's tech engineering department. And to appear on CNN Marketplace Africa and now on Corner Jutta de Beer. So it's amazing. So I like I say, the words that my friend told me all those years ago of making sure I had 3 years worth of my running expenses and savings helped a lot, because I've been able to bootstrap the business then and invest in it and work with some amazing collaborators who've also supported the business in so many different ways. And I think that's also the benefit of being a mature founder, is like you have made relationships all that time that you can like leverage and weigh in, and you obviously have had people who then are supporting your journey, and I'm very thankful for all those people who have been supporting my journey, for sure. Yeah.
Word to Jose Mourinho, investments from the past.
You had a second question.
Got caught up.
Yeah, I know.
What's your word to the youth?
My word to the youth? Oh, I have so many words for the youth.
Share them all.
Yeah, I think one is run your own race. Just realize, like, just be comfortable in the fact that you're running your own race. Like, I appreciate that, yes, it's very easy to feel like your race is slower than other people's. Other people are getting other opportunities that you're not getting. And I think just be faithful in the actions that you're taking and the fact that you're doing good. Let that push you to carry on doing the good stuff that you're doing. I think read widely as much as is possible, and not only on social media, like read books and magazines, because I think that's also something which I encourage. And listen to the podcasts.
We're reading a lot.
I know.
We're reading a lot. We're on Twitter the whole day.
I know. But I think what I appreciate, and also this is something which is kind of interesting, because I know, especially with creatives and especially artists, there's this debate around being self-represented versus being gallery represented. There's something about curation which I really appreciate. And so that's what I mean is like reading widely, because on Twitter, like, there's an element of curation, but it's not active curation. There's curation because of how the algorithm is running, and the makers of that curation don't necessarily have the interest in what you're receiving as being the kind of reason why they are doing that curation. So that's the reason why I say read widely, because then you're getting the benefit of seeing what different people are curating. And I think that helps a lot in like broadening one's mind and broadening one's mindset. Travel as much as you can. Talk to different people and learn, and like do it with an open heart of like hearing what they're saying and learning from what they're saying, because you never know where you could be inspired by somebody who's doing something totally different to what you're doing. The other thing is, I appreciate that actually it's difficult in the creative industry to find the jobs that actually really give you joy. And sometimes it feels like you're stuck in an office job and you're not able to kind of express the creativity that you have. And I want to encourage people to try find ways of expressing that creativity, because I think that's actually something which is really special. To be in the like roles where, yes, it's like funding your daily life, but to be able to find ways of expressing that creativity in interesting ways. It could be the fact that, yes, you could be a mathematician, but it's like there's something about like the creativity of how you are exposed to different things which might influence how you're approaching mathematical equations. Or if you are a car maker, if you're running an operation line, like basically a manufacturing line, there's something about thinking differently about how it could be done. That's also expressing creativity. It's not necessarily always the way in which like you express creativity. It has to be like you're painting something. I think sometimes even in just how you're doing your job, there's a creativity around that. You could be using different tools to actually leverage that. I think there's creativity in that. So I don't know if it's one of those things where I find like creativity in the mundane, but I do. So I kind of appreciate it, and that's what I think is there's something beautiful about that, which I hope more people in youth think about. Yeah.
A mentor of mine once said, creativity is a toolbox. It's something you pull out to use. Correct. To create solutions. So people need to stop thinking about it as an end destination, rather as a vehicle towards the things you need to do. Agree.
It's how you're doing something. And that's why I say, like, you can find creativity in delivering, like, retail boxes. You can find creativity in the wall that you're painting. Because there's sometimes like just the fact that you have precision in what you're doing. actually is something which is very unique and expresses something which not everybody else can do. So,
How do you maximize the value of art?
it is about one, doing the collection management, and also making sure you're also recording any other information about the artist that you can find. So if you see that the artist is, like there's a newspaper article that's written about the artist, save that if you can. Look after the actual physical work as well. So there's conservation work which needs to happen, which a lot of people don't take very seriously enough. There's some remarkable people who are getting into conservation, and actually it's a skill which is very, very desperately needed to ensure that the longevity of the artworks that we have. So that's something which you need to be mindful of. Like, what is the environment that I'm storing this artwork in? Is it humid? Is it not? Is it a photograph and actually there's sunlight directed at this artwork? That's going to degrade it. It may be an ephemeral work in any event, something that also is like structured to degrade. There's a artwork that I have which was made from green sunlight soap, and it's degraded, but that's what the artist intended, which is also something beautiful.
The question I'd forgotten is, how are you taking in what the world is doing to add to what you're already doing?
I try to do that by traveling widely and seeing what other people are doing, and trying to then think about the ways in which we can also deploy that. So one, the very mere fact of building a collection management platform is something which didn't exist in South Africa. One that was specifically catered towards collectors of modern and contemporary African art. That's something which was not done. So on the platform, if you're buying an artwork from South Africa or from Kenya, you can document that you bought it in those currencies, and it's generally got a lot of artists who are from those regions, which maybe other collection management platforms wouldn't have. In Europe, there's actually also specialist art insurance, which not many people are aware of. So also integrating that, and now there's two insurance providers that I actually have on the platform for collectors in South Africa who need specialist art insurance. And the other thing which I was looking at is actually art-backed lending, which also is another area where in some jurisdictions it's available. In South Africa, not many people are looking at. So effectively, it's either two ways. One, I have artworks and I might need money in a short-term basis. I don't have other secured assets. So basically, I can lend you money which is secured by the artworks that I have.
Oh, damn, so it's cash crusaders for art.
For art, exactly.
That's
yes.
crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And because it's an asset class which yes, if you're working with art, you kind of will appreciate it. You'll be able to ascertain and underwrite kind of that artwork. And so basically, yes, you'll be able to hold that artwork for the 2 years that you have that money. At the end of the 2 years, you pay me back, or I keep the art and I have to sell it. Yeah, but exactly, cash crusaders for art. Or just people getting financing to buy art. But there's more and more players who are doing that in South Africa now, which is quite cool.
Karabo Morule, Capital Art, Beer. This was special.
This was really special.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I learned so much. Like, I was like, okay, cool.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Damn, might collect art more.
You should definitely collect
Well, I'm a
art.
collector. I have a piece or two.
Yes, exactly. So it's more about now making sure you document the details of the artworks. Yeah. So just being intentional about that. Wherever you're buying artwork now, ask the artist, what's your name? Do you have a CV? Do you have a website? Do you have an Instagram account? What's the dimension? Measure the dimensions. If you frame it, you can find ways to make sure you're framing it well. Invest in that time, and then it's all about like seeing if you can also promote that artist, and like there's elements around that which assists with that artist's work, getting visibility on this artwork that can also drive value as well.
Thank you so much.
Cool.